Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick, and I'm an alcoholic.
All right.
And right now, I ain't gonna say I'm a grateful alcoholic. Let my nerves get settled first. Is it working tonight? Oh, okay, great. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks for asking me up. Whether you know it or not, you helped me to stay sober from Monday till today. Knowing that I had to come up here and attempt to do this. Can y'all hear me back in the back there? Yeah. Good. Y'all suffer just as bad as these people up here. Yeah, all right. I am Rick, and I am an alcoholic.
All right.
My sobriety date, the one that I claim, I don't remember too much, but I claim it, and it's December 7th, 1983. And by God's grace, a lot of love, a lot of understanding, a lot of help from a lot of people, a lot of places, people in and out of these rooms, people that I believe had a loving God in their lives, who knew of a loving God instead of a punishing God, a vindictive God, people who had a loving God. That's how I'm standing here tonight, with a lot of help from a lot of people by the grace of God. I'm from Hamlet, North Carolina. And first and foremost, I'd like to thank my homies for coming up here with me. And you may not believe it, but I've known them guys for over 45 years, 50 years. We were kids together. And tonight we're up here together. Who would have thunk it? One of them, about 40-some years ago, we were dating two cousins and lived at the same house. We probably was there on a Saturday night. What is this, January? Yeah, it might have been back in 72. Yeah, so for real. So it's amazing, how these things come together, And tonight we're here at a meeting. Chuck, it wasn't that much effort to get me to come up here. Anybody who knows me knows that. See a lot of guys from the noon meetings, a lot of guys I've seen in other places, but it's good. Where did all of y'all come from? Good God. There wasn't nobody here when I came in 15 minutes ago. They just swoop in like doves. Yeah, but hey, Amber. Newcomer. And my friend Donna back there. Yeah, hey, Donna. I'm going to give you she came out here tonight, somebody that I truly, truly admire for having the courage to stick this thing out. My job tonight, what I was asked to do is to share my experience, strength, and hope. To tell you in a general way what I was like, what happened to me, and what I'm trying to be about today. Hopefully I'll get to today part. Usually I stay drunk for a while, and and then I was a drug addict too, so I got to watch how I share up here and everything. I don't see any kids, but I'll try to keep it. I don't find it necessary or unnecessary to use profanity or anything. So I've grown a little bit in that area. But my road to recovery wasn't really an easy one. I heard about Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 25. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 26, and I've been here ever since. I'm almost 60 years old, and that's by the grace of God. And I try to really understand what it is that Alcoholics Anonymous is about and what I'm about. And if I don't mean you no harm, I try to stay away from you. One of the most important things that I can say up here tonight is that I don't represent anyone other than myself. I'm from the Hamlet group of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was born in a hospital that you could throw a rock from where we meet at over to where the hospital used to be, the Hamlet Hospital. And on Thursday nights at 8 o'clock, we hold meetings right there at All Saints Episcopal Church. And we have some pretty good meetings, in my opinion. Man, there's a lot of guys in here. Usually when I'm standing up in front of this many white people, I'm in trouble. I'll get to some of that in a minute, Good God Almighty. It's easy today. We're not a glum lot. We laugh. If we could find nothing other than misery and suffering and bitterness and sorry, whatever, low-lifedness, we wouldn't come here. I'm grateful to know a little bit about Alcoholics Anonymous. and the how, whens, the whats, and the whys about it. I didn't know when I got here. But today, I try to be more about that than more about personality. And boy, do I have a story about personalities. It used to be back in the 80s when they got the answering machines to call, that you had to pay a little extra. I had about 6 of them at my house. If you want Rick number 1, press 1. If you want Slick Rick, press 2. If you want Rick the Addict, press 3. If you want, I used to have call boxes. I mean, really. I heard a story when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous. It was really funny, but it meant a lot to me. It was generated around Milwaukee back in the 40s. And some of the people in here might have heard it, maybe, I don't know. I'm aging myself, but when I came in the 80s, it was a strong movement called Back to Basics. There were a couple of guys, Joe and Charlie, and some other guys down in the South and in Texas and everything, who took Alcoholics Anonymous really seriously. And they took a stand at group levels to restructure or reform Alcoholics Anonymous in a way. And they call it Back to Basics and Back to the Big Book. And we started doing big book studies and talks and seminars about primary purpose and singleness of purpose and a whole lot of stuff. And I heard some things. I went to a couple of them, one at Hofstra University and one in Manhattan back in the 80s and the 90s. And one of the things that was fascinating is when they talked about alcoholism, they talked about how engraved it was in the American culture. That going all the way back to, way back, even back to the signing of the Declaration of Independence, back to one doctor, I think his name was Benjamin Rush. He signed the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution with Thomas Jefferson, John Hancock, and all the forefathers. He was a doctor, an MD doctor, and he had done extensive work about alcoholism in America. And he came to a conclusion that the only hope for this classification of people, real alcoholics, was to lock them up, put them in a colony, put walls around it, and don't let them get none. Keep them clean by not having access or availability to get to or bringing in alcohol. And surely enough, it was such a prevalent problem that even George Washington, the first president in general, he made a comment or State of the Union message or something of that sort to Congress and wrote a paper about alcoholism as a destructive fiber in the American, the newly formed America, what to watch out for, alcoholism. And I'm telling you the truth because in 1841 in Baltimore, a group of people got together, about 6 guys, and they stopped drinking. I don't know whether resentment or temperate or whatever, but they stopped drinking, and they came up with an idea that they would go out, each one, and bring somebody else into the meeting and talk to them about not drinking. They had 2 steps. I quit drinking, and I'm going to help somebody else and bring somebody else. Steps 1 and 12, the ones we have today. But the fact of the matter is they named themselves the Washingtonians after George Washington, George Washington's take on alcohol and alcoholism was one of the topics of their discussion. And so they started calling themselves the Washingtonian movement. And some of us who know AA history know about that. So alcohol ain't, and one of the things that I think about today, and this is just me, when that doctor way back in 1776 or whenever it was back there said that you got to lock them up, put a wall around them, tonight you guys are my wall. You guys are my wall. Today, that is true. I keep a wall around myself, and that's this fellowship and this program. Some of you, I go to meetings every day. Thank God that I've been so situated that I can make meetings and be involved in this fellowship. But you are my wall. You are my protection from that world out there. And I'm grateful for that. Now, again, that story about Milwaukee. There was a brewery, and this guy worked at a brewery. And he drowned, what you call industrial accident or whatever, but he drowned, fell in a vat, and he drowned. And his wife was having it investigated to see if there was just cause to bring a lawsuit against the brewery for causing her husband to drown. And she was advised by people who were doing the investigation that she didn't have a case. And she wanted to know why she didn't have a case of her husband drowning in a vat at work on the job. And the advisory people told us, said, well, we got him on film. He got out twice and went to the bathroom. he came back and got back in. You know? So I mean, he was a young guy, you know, and then at her funeral, at his funeral, you know, some of his classmates showed up, you know, and they went to her. She was grieving and everything, and they said, well, was it true that he drowned? You know, actually they said, yeah. Said he just loved to drink. He drank himself to death. And they said, friends was telling him, said, well, we went to high school with him. We knew the guy. Said, did anybody ever tell him about AA, Alcoholics Anonymous? And the widow looked at him, looked him square in the face and said, he wasn't that bad. There he is laying there dead, you know. And that's the kind of stuff that got my attention, you know, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. It was stories like that, you know. I was born and raised again in Hamlet. Stuff that influenced my life was not stuff that I would consider healthy or normal for any child today. I was surrounded by bootleggers, liquor houses. Grew up in a part of Hamlet now that's known as Dobbins Heights. They call it the North Yard. They hand you your hat real quick if you got caught in that part of town, you know, for the wrong reasons, you know. And so I grew up with a survival of the fittest type of attitude, you know. Wasn't nothing for me to have a knife or a gun or, you know, whatever. I'm talking about as a kid, you know. I used to carry all the time, you know, something. We call them equalizers, you know. And I started drinking at an early age. First drink, I was, say, about 4 or 5 years old. And I took a bet from some friends of mine that I'd drink some Clorox. And they took some Clorox and poured it in the lid, and I drank it. And I won the bet. So I had about 7 cents, you know, penny here, penny there, nickel, that I had just won. And another guy, his grandmother ran a bootlegger liquor house. And he asked me, he said, I'll bet you won't drink no moonshine, no creek liquor. I said, I bet you I will. I said, I bet. I'm 5 years old. And we go out to, they used to keep it in a water meter. There was a hole in the ground that had a piece of metal, iron over it, where you turn your water on and off on the outside. They kept 2 or 3 half a gallon double quarts of moonshine out there, because if you got caught with it in your house, you know, it was a bootlegging charge. If it was in the yard on the property, it was lesser charge than being in the house, having it available. And so what they would do, they'd send out there for it, bring it in, pour it, and take it back outside. So we knew where it was, and we went out there and got a jug of it. And they took the lid off and pried that. They had 2 lids, one circular and one flip lid, and they took it off. And I made a mistake, see. When I drank the Clorox, it was in a little cap. And you just whisk down a cap full. See, I put my mouth on the side of a half a gallon jug and slugged a big slug of that creek liquor. And Lord knows the Clorox tastes much better than that creek liquor. You know, my hair stood up, my eye popped out, my tongue swollen, fingernails, toenails curled, lightning and everything hit my body. And I hadn't even swallowed it. I'm serious. When you cut your drinking teeth on moonshine, creek liquor, homebrew, stuff like that, you don't get a good start in life. You really don't, you know. Now, I drank some pretty good stuff. I had a pretty extensive drinking career. You know, it wasn't long, but it was extensive. You know, I later on went to wine, but I wasn't no stranger to drinking wine. I grew up in the Holiness Church, Church of God in Christ, and they served real wine on Communion Sundays. On Communion Sundays, they did not serve grape juice or Kool-Aid, and then they served Morgan Davis, Concord, grape wine. And it had a bite to it. You could tell when you hit that little thimble, whatever it was, that you was drinking wine. So I had drink wine all, you know, in church and communion. And you knew when it was Communion Sunday at my church, too. You could look up there at the preacher and lift me down, and hair would be kind of sideways. It was something else. So I knew about alcohol. You know, my folks made alcohol. My father's side, they lived up Carthage Creek area, up by Ellaby, Mangum, up above Rockingham. They used to call it Prison Camp Road. Now it's Carthage Creek. But my family lived up there in them hills, and they made stuff that you could blow stumps with, you know. And So I knew about drinking. I knew about booze or whatever. But on a regular basis, I got a paper route when I was in the 5th grade. And this paper route, I had to deliver a Charlotte News, and it was a pretty big job. I kept that job about a year and a half till I went to 7th grade, from 5th grade through 6th grade on in 7th grade. So I had a little entrepreneurial spirit, and I knew about having money in my pocket all the time because I had to collect, and I had some extra newspapers I could sell them. And what I started doing on that paper route was my first stop was a liquor house, a bootleg house. And you could take a baby food jar, which is 4 ounces, that's a half of a pint, you could get a baby food jar and get it almost full for 50 cents worth of booze. You could get vodka, which was rock gut vodka, or creek liquor. And I would get a baby food jar and start my paper route. And I had a big heavy-duty paper route. I had 2 baskets on the back and a big basket reinforced on the front, and I'd have some newspapers on my back that I'd start with, because those Charlotte papers were pretty big, Charlotte News. They were pretty good-sized newspapers. And I'd start that thing out, man, and I'd be walking that bicycle, Boy, you start pumping it, and I'd stop there and get me a shot of booze, and I'd stick my top lip in it. That's all. All you have to do is just open it up and let your top lip get wet and lick it. Shake it. Don't drink none. I knew better than that. Yeah. Then the next time, I let my tongue get wet on it. And pretty good. About 10 minutes later, I'd take a little draw off of it, And that was for medicinal purposes. That was for working my paper out. About the middle of that paper route, I looked like that witch on the Wizard of Oz. Shoot. Yeah. I started drinking medicinally. I'm saying, I'm just telling you the truth. As a preteen, as a kid, I was drinking that stuff. And so it wasn't nothing, on Fridays or Saturdays or whatever for me to get a gang of the guys to ride with me. And they had a drink called a Yankee Doodle. You know what a Yankee Doodle is? Those little, 8-ounce Coca-Colas, those little small Cokes, slugs. You pour some creek liquor in it, take a shot of booze and put it in, call them a Yankee Doodles. We was all drinking Yankee Doodles. So I'd never been what you call right. So by the time I got 7th grade, I was getting in trouble. I saw where bringing wine to school and selling drinks was more profitable than delivering newspapers. And I bring candy, to school, and wine to school. I could sell a penny piece of candy for 10 cents. I could sell a honey bun or a sweet roll for 50 cents. They cost a dime. I could sell them for 50 cents in school. If you wanted to eat candy or eat sweets in school, it cost a little bit more money, than it did at the store. And that was my thing. I was slinging candy and sweet rolls, bringing wine, and go in the boys' bathroom with a fifth of wine, and if you had a nickel, you could get a tap. If you had a dime, you get a swallow. If you had a quarter, you could blow bubbles. I'm serious, and I was collecting the money and regulating. I had guys working with me, and surely enough, we had a trip to Raleigh in 7th grade, Hamlet Junior High, and this was first when segregation first ended back in 71. 69, 70 back in there, and we went to Raleigh, and the governor and the town council and the city manager, all of them wrote letters to our school. Don't you ever bring them. we went to the planetarium, the museum, and a K&W restaurant. We went to one in the morning, the planetarium. We went to a K&W restaurant. Then we went to the museum where they had the dinosaurs in the afternoon. And boy, by the time we got back to Hamlet, they were calling down, don't you ever bring them up, 2 busloads of it. We had wine, we were rocking. And some friends of mine got, I got busted. I got busted in 7th grade for selling. And some friends of mine who were in my class made a suggestion that I stop drinking so much I was going to get put out of school in 7th grade. Which I did. I got suspended, but they suggested that I use pharmaceuticals. They gave me a couple of black beauties, speckled birds, yellow jackets, stuff like that. And I think I got about 6 of them to start with. And about later on that day, I asked the guy, I said, how you selling those things? And he told me, oh, you get so many, a fistful for $1. I said, give me $10 worth, you know. I started out, you know, pretty heavy. And that's the beginning of the end with that, the pharmaceutical business. But I stuck with it all the way to the end. All the way to the end. Wasn't just drinking, but I stuck with the other stuff too. But drinking wine, we had the Fellowship of the Grapes, Brotherhood of the Grapes, and I drank Rosé, Chablis, Bourgeois, I got false teeth, I can't say some word. But yeah, I drank all kinds of different wines. I knew about them. You know, Yago Sangria, Jago Basila Brusco, you know, all kinds of red wine, blue wine, all kinds of wine. But it wasn't nothing like Night Train, Mad Dog 2020, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, we had a wine called Boar's Head. It was about the cheapest rock gut you could get, 89 cents a bottle. It had dust on the bottle. You had to wipe dust off to get the top off. And I was drinking that Boar's Head wine. And I'm pretty bad. I did not have to live like that. I know back then. But today, it wasn't as much for getting attention but at home, things weren't really ever rosy or peachy at my house. By the time I got in ninth grade, you know, my mother had 6 kids, and my father was never in the house. She raised the kid by herself. So I had what they call a spiritual experience, a revolutionary change in attitude and outlook from church and Sunday school and all that stuff. I went all the way to the extreme when I heard of a group one time. My neighbor had an album from a group called the Funkadelics. Now, you may not ever hear that name or have heard it. They had 2. Later on, they became Parliament Funkadelics. But I heard some music by a group called the Funkadelics, and they explained information. They employed information to me that was, up to that point, hitherto unknown. I found out the secrets of life, you know, from the Funkadelics. They had a song called Cosmic Slop. And Cosmic Slop, you know, you get the song, the album was cartoonish, very, very cartoonish and childlike, but adult cartoon. And they put the words to the song. They wrote them in the album cover. And this song, Cosmic Slop, it went a little like this. It said, I was born one of 5 until my mother had older sister and 3 young brothers. We seen it hard, we seen it kind of rough. But always with a smile, she was sure to try to hide the facts from us that life was really tough. And it went on. You know, that's about as much of it as I'm going to say. But it explained, you know, some things that I was, you know, kind of in the dark about. And I went from being a conscientious, regular little young man to a devil, a demon, you know. And if you listen to that kind of music and you use the kind of stuff and you hung around the kind of people that I hung around with, they had a term called darn it to hell boys, you know, darn it to hell. And I was one of them, darn it to hell boys. And by the time I was in 9th grade, situation went down dealing with my pharmaceutical business that I approached a grown-up and said some things and did some things and demanded my money that he owed me. And word got back to my mother that I had done these things. And I denied her with every fiber of my being that I was that kind of person, but I had done it. And shortly after that, my mom left. She left with nobody at the house but me and my sister. And my mom left. She moved out, left me and my sister there. And something happened to me as a result of choices that I had made. Music I listened to, stuff I did, places I went, and how I was living. I came up with a decision, and the closest I've ever seen to match it exactly is in that story a lady shares, Freedom from Bondage. On the first page of that story, in the big book, she says, if I don't get close to anyone, if I don't let anybody in, love anybody, I'll never be disappointed, I'll never be hurt. I developed the same or similar type of attitude towards life. I started drinking to get drunk, ragdoll drunk at that age, you know, roughly 13, 14 years old. And I'm laying out beside the road or coming home. No adult was there. And I'm getting just suicidal drunk. Matter of fact, that was something that I woke up on Christmas. I think it was 71, Christmas morning. We had no heat. We had no electricity. We had no running water. And the house was cold. And the only reason that was, because it was morning. And I thought about killing myself. And surely enough, we had decon rat poison. And I diluted some. Well, anyway, it didn't work. I took enough to kill a horse, but this jackass woke right up, the next morning. And surely enough, I was a sad case. I went to school every day because school was my hustle. School was where I ate lunch, made my money, took my this and my that and whatever. And I got a job working at a pool room. And I survived, and my mother came back. She came back, she left about September. She came back the following spring around March, April. And I had begged her in a letter. I wrote her a letter and told her she'd come back, I'll be good. And surely enough, I attempted to be good. When my mother came back, I felt like it's one thing to be alone or whatever, but when your own mother don't want you, then it's the difference between shame and guilt. Guilt says I did a bad thing, and shame says I am a bad thing. And I had a lot of shame. I mean, if anybody, I always put up a bluff or front or whatever, never talked about it, didn't want you to talk about it or anything, the pain that was inside. And substances and alcohol and that wildlife and juvenile delinquency or whatever, that was the filler. That was my substitute. But my mom came back and I did good, and I'm going to speed it up. I went to a new school they had out Rockingham called Richmond Senior High. I was in the first sophomore class, and I'm the second junior and the third class to graduate out there. I went out there in 72, 73, 70, yeah, and I kind of moderated and regulated. I only got sloppy drunk on, when it was okay to get sloppy drunk. By my senior year in high school, I missed 62 days. That's not counting the days that I checked in homeroom and then left and went out. And I graduated. I graduated top, whatever, in the top third of my class. I graduated well enough. I got accepted in the Air Force. And I had offers to go to college, but I chose not to go to college. I had a JROTC course in my senior year. It was the first year they had the JROTC at the school. And so I was in the formation. I was a senior, so I got rank and everything. And so I was in the formation, setting up, doing a lot of work with that. And yada, 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 yada. And I did pretty good my senior year, except for not going to school. I figured if I picked up or whatever, why go all the way over there to do this and just want to be somewhere else. So, and plus I had bad teeth, real, what they call meth mouth, rotten teeth. I went in the Air Force, I had 62 cavities. They did 9 root canals and filled all of those fillings. They told me, said, if you come in the military, the Army said they were going to pull my teeth. They told me, if you come in the Army, what they're going to do, we're going to give you a new set. They're going to pull your teeth. And the Air Force said they'd fix them. Plus, the Air Force told me some questions like, do you like to sleep on the ground? I said, no, not sober, you like to run and march everywhere you go? And no, not really, you like to eat sea rations out of a brown box or whatever, sardines and canned goods. I said, I'll do it, but I don't like it. They said, well, in the Air Force, you sleep in a bed, in a dormitory. Everywhere you go, you either fly or ride on a truck or a bus. And we eat in cafeterias. We don't even have to take our trays up. We got people busting the tables in the Air Force. Sign me up for that Air Force thing, So I went in the Air Force, and that was getting close to the beginning of the end. I went in at 18, and I spent 4 years in the Air Force, and I got medically retired from the Air Force in 1979. What happened was, y'all ever heard of a guy called Gil Scott? Gil Scott Hearn had a song out one time. And the title of the song, the name of the song, and this is no joke. I know this is an AA meeting, but it went down angel dust. And boy, I went to California, and I went out there. If anything they ever tell you about California, if anybody here from California, I don't want to talk to you after the meeting, I'm going to say this, but I will talk to you. If it's anything on earth, far out there, or whatever, a wackadoo with, I'm telling you, I went to California, and I went out there with good intentions. They asked me when I went in the Air Force, what are your goals? Or you had to state your goals. I said, well, I want to go in and enlist and come out a 4-star general. I'm going to be just like Chappie James. I want to, I'm going to make it all the way to the top. They looked at my records. They looked at said, you can do it, son. They took me in the Air Force. And surely enough, I was a wooden soldier, a tin soldier by day, and a fool by night. I took classes in college. I studied string instruments and stuff, coming out the Holiness Church. I could sing and dance and play music. I thought I could, and people said I could sing pretty good back there in them days. I could hit anything. I could sing all 5 octaves, bass, tenor, baritone, whatever you wanted. I could do it. I thought I could, and surely enough, I was going to do that Hollywood swinging and go to California, become a star. First time somebody sees me, they go, "Oh, we got him. He's a star." And I went out there, and man, I'm telling you no lie. Woo! In California, I learned to ask, what would this do? so I never asked that over in North Carolina. I didn't care, I've been to New York. I ran the streets of Brooklyn or whatever, and, Bed-Stuy, Harlem. I've seen Mexican mud, a Hungarian horse. I've seen Perico, blow coke. I've seen a whole lot of things. LSD, blotter, mescaline. In California, you learn to ask questions. Man, they had stuff that they roll up for cigarettes out there that would take you out one whoop, whoop. Man, that ain't no skunk weed, You learn to ask questions, and I progressed on, got into some trouble. I got to see my childhood idols, the Parliament Funkadelic. They went on a big tour around '76. They had the biggest tour in the world, bigger than the Grateful Dead. George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic. I seen the mothership land in Oakland, San Francisco, Sacramento, and here's a story. And I went to a concert one night. I think it was on my 20th birthday. I had made E4, got my 3rd strike below the zone. You're supposed to have at least 28 to 30 months in, and I didn't have a 24 or so. And I was getting ready to put it on. And I had studied, I was well ahead to get that next strike, be a staff, under 4 years I was going to be a staff sergeant. I thought this and all this, and I was going to college, working at the grocery store, bagging groceries, and partying and whatever, wasn't never sleeping or whatever. Went to a concert, Parliament Funkadelic, and at the end of the show, it was about, I would say anywhere from, no exaggeration, 50 to 75 people on stage. They had an entourage and everybody in the organization. I don't know if the roadies was up there too or whatever, fans, but on this particular stage in Oakland Coliseum, they had about 70 people up there jamming at the end of the show. They called everybody back out that participated. They had the Funkadelics, the Parliaments, Boosie's Rubber Band, Fred Wesley, Maceo Parker, the Brecker Brothers, the Brides of Funkenstein. They had all these different organizations, They merged, and I was just waiting on them to call me up, and, I had worked my way right down in the front, and somebody passed something along in a little bowl, and I got ghosted. I was whoosh. I woke up. That was on a Saturday night. I woke up on Tuesday, and I was in my room at the barracks, and I had a place off base and a room that I maintained on the barracks and everything, and I woke up in my room at the barracks. I said, "Oh my God, I gotta go to work. It's Tuesday." I went to work, and my officer in charge, the NCOIC, non-commissioned officer in charge, asked me where I was, why I didn't show up to work that Monday, and I told him the truth. I was at a concert, about 2 in the morning, the spaceship landed, white light shined on me, and I don't remember nothing else. Some alien abduction, He took me to see my commander. I told him the same thing. I had a stub, a ticket stub, I was at this show, and said, go, I got to pass. I got to, go away. But that's what it was. I said, white light shine, spaceship, people start coming out of the spaceship. I don't remember nothing else. They took me back or whatever. But, that's kind of like, the kind of life I lived in a way. A little bit later on, I got exposed to, harder, more serious stuff. And it got to the point where I didn't have to hear nothing or see. I could have my eyes closed and be watching television. I could be, I like Jimi Hendrix. I'm a big Jimi Hendrix fan. And I could hear machine gun and all different kinds of stuff. And with no music be playing. And I could be, I'd be standing around tapping my finger. I had an afro. I could be pulling my hair out, twisting. And people at my job start noticing. Say, son, is everything all right with you? And I said, sure, And at the time, some things happened, and I got in some real bad company. Again, I was going to be in the music business. And I found out one thing, that really devastated me about 1978 is that you can't be under contract with a record company and be under contract with the United States Armed Forces at the same time. You own by Uncle Sam. You cannot sign a contract with nobody else while you're in the military. And I found that out, and that kind of like blew me way off. I haven't played music. I went into psychiatric hospital around 79, right at 79, and they said I had acute schizophrenic breakdown. And at the time, that sounded impressive. I didn't know what it was. And they say you're probably bipolar too. I said, polarities. Both sides of the world. Pretty extensive knowledge, And little did I know, And I went in the hospital, and I had one friend. He got busted. He had about $275,000 in a personal checking account down at that bank, up that Pyramid Building Bank in San Francisco, and he was a sergeant in the Air Force. He had family in Colombia, South America. His father was a professor of archaeology and anthropology, and his mother was from North Dakota, and she met the father on a dig in Wisconsin, Wyoming, or somewhere. I knew his whole family history and everything. And he was born down there and raised down there, but he used his mother's citizenship to get into the Air Force, and the Air Force took him. And he worked as a mechanic, aircraft mechanic, and he was getting packages from home. And my goodness, he was my best friend. I met him in college playing guitar. And this guy could go down to San Francisco and buy 3 guitars, spend $3,000 or $4,000, and then take them home and just let them lay there. I mean, he didn't even touch them, And I was impressed with this guy. He was my best friend. But something happened, and some people came to talk to him, and they took him away. And I knew it wasn't long before they was coming for me. They never came for me, but I knew it wasn't long. And another friend got in some trouble, and so I needed to get out of California. I applied for a special duty assignment to go to Lackland to be a military training instructor. And I got the assignment, and I was waiting for my ship date. And just so happened, when I was talking about all these things started going on mentally or whatever, the pressure, the fear, being scared, being found out and busted and all this kind of stuff on past stuff that I'd done. Not what I was doing. I was just trying to stay coherent until I got off and went to Lackland to teach military science. And what happened was I had a sit-in talk with my commander. This guy was a full-bird colonel. He was a TMO, Transportation Management Officer, 6th Military. Yeah, well, he was the chief hog at my job, and I had an opportunity to talk with him. And I went in his office and put my feet up on his desk and took one of his cigars and lit it. And we had some words, and unfortunately, he didn't like none of my words. He told me, you need to see a doctor. And I said, doctor for what? He said, never mind, you're going to see a doctor. He called my section commander, a captain, told the captain to come up there and get me. And he was on the phone calling this hospital, Travis, Big Green Hospital, Big Willie, whatever. Now, it's a big green hospital that they got, one at Lackland, one at Travis. And he told me, he said, we're taking you up to the hospital to see a doctor. You got to go. That's an order, on the commander's orders. And I went with my captain up there, and I'd done aerobics. I could run right at a 4-minute mile. I studied the martial arts, and I was drinking and smoking, playing basketball. I said, ain't nothing wrong with me. Physically, I thought, But when they got me to the doctor's office, there's a big word up there, psychiatrist. I wasn't ready for that, And they took me in the psychiatrist's office and told me that straight up that if my commander was concerned about me, if the person that these records stated that I was really me, then my commander was afraid that I was, something was wrong with me. I was going through something, and I needed some help. And I said, there's nothing wrong with me. He said, well, it's your commander's orders. He's ordered me in for a 3-day observation. And when he told me I had to go in for a 3-day observation, it was orders, I just crumbled. I knew my assignment was gone. Once you go for a psych evaluation, you can't be a it's hard to get a training job or whatever. And I knew my career was gone and everything, so I just broke down. That 3-day observation turned into about 7 months. I was in the psychiatric unit, and I got TDRL'd out, came home, went to college a year up at A&T, then left and went to New York, got a job in New York around 1980 with the United States Postal Service. I took civil service test, got a job with the Postal Service, and that was the beginning of the end. For the next 3 years, my drinking and substance abuse and mental health and everything went way, way down. The only way you can lose a job like that, civil service job, when you're a veteran, and I got bonus points, extra points for being considered disabled. At the time I was service connected. I wasn't even out of the military yet. I was just retired, temporary disabled retired. And I got the job with the post office, and in there is where the end came swiftly. I was drinking with guys at a place called the Williamsburg Post Office, Williamsburg Station, right under the Williamsburg Bridge in Brooklyn. And it was guys in there that drank with the Rough Riders back in 1918. If you ever see a postal uniform, they got the blue Screamline Eagles with the blue stripes and the blue shirts and everything. These guys had red stripes and red embroidery, and they had horses with the Pony Express on them. That's the kind of uniforms they wore to work. Some of you may remember when the letter carriers had that horse, Pony Express, and them kind of guys. I could play cards, I could drink, I talk, yada, yada, yada. They fell in love with me. They called me the kid. The kid would go out at 7:45 and be at the liquor store when it opened and have a mail bag and come back to the post office. Now, the strategy was I come back at 8 o'clock after the liquor store opened with the booze, and I come through the front door with the customers instead of coming through the employee entrance. I come in the front door with the customers, work my way behind the counter, go upstairs with the booze. We had lockers that were dedicated to just alcohol. You had your rum lockers, your whiskey lockers, your vodka lockers. Didn't have no good liquor, no scotch. It was mostly just whiskey and rum and vodka and gin. And it was nothing for me to come in on a Saturday morning or Friday morning and go into the locker room and blow bubbles in a bottle of booze, bloop, bloop. And then go lay down on the skid or go in the swing room, the day room, and lay down and get mad when the boss wakes me up and tells me I got to go out on the street and deliver mail. I have been inebriated on the clock with mail on me and the keys with checks. That was the time when government checks would come out. Like Mother's Day, check day would fall on like a Friday. The preceding weekend could be the first, second, and third. And we would have nothing but checks. Letter carriers went out into the streets with nothing but checks. City, state, federal, local checks would fall on that same day. And I'm telling you no lie. I would hate to have to estimate how much the value of all those checks were. But I have been in the projects, man, and they have to pick me up and bring a mail truck in there and throw me on the mail truck. Passing out. And you know what? The unions took my case and they said he had a seizure. And said the people said that he was drunk. He was drinking alcohol. And the union said he could have one. There was only one. He had one drink and had a seizure because of medication and his mental health stuff and all that. And I retired from the post office in 1997. I retired, fully retired, 20 years plus my military time. They added it all up. I had 22 years, full retirement. Okay, but the end came around 1983. I had worked my way up to getting suspensions, 21 days, time off, suspended off the clock, 21 days. I was pending termination on last chance probation. That was my status in the post office. And I come up with the idea that I needed some help, with my drinking. Every time I get in real serious trouble, I'd say it was my drinking, go check myself into the psych ward, go out to Fort Hamilton, spend some time out there, and whatever. Okay, what happened was I went to my boss and told him that The VA said that I needed to go away to a place called Montrose. Montrose was a big rehab upstate New York, a little further up from Manhattan, up from the city, up in the mountains up there, and by the Hudson Valley up that way somewhere. And they told me that I needed to go away, and they couldn't tell me how long I'd be away. Oh boy, I ran out. How long I'd be away. What they told me was that they do an assessment when I got up there. It could be 6 weeks to 6 months or longer. When I got up there, they would see it. And I told my boss that. My boss told me, he said, I can't spare you. Why don't you get on antabutes and just come to work and don't drink? So I went to his boss, the station manager, and the manager of the station told me about a program that the post office had called PAR. This was before EAP, 1983. EAP came out around 83, 84, 85, somewhere along in there. He told me about a program called PAR. It was Postal Alcohol Rehabilitation. And he sent me down there. And I went to the PAR, and I took a test, a questionnaire. I got 100 on both sides. Oh yeah, but I didn't stop right then and there. Sequence of events happened, and just so happened that I saw where the big book talks about resentment being the number one offender. I saw where some things happened in my life, and I picked back up dry goods. And from dry goods, I gravitated slowly with dry goods back to alcohol. I swore I'd never drink again. And I was 25, and something happened. And Kool-Aid and apple juice and orange juice and grape soda and all that just don't kick well with dry goods. You know, when you're doing cocaine and marijuana or whatever, elevator don't go fast enough to the top. Or, you know, the buttons don't get pushed hard enough when you're drinking apple juice. So I knew what would do the trick. And if I'm spending $200 or $300, $400, spend another $1 and get a drink. And that's what I started doing. And it got to the point when I didn't have money for the other stuff. 99 cents, $1, $1.50, you get a quart of beer, bottle of wine, and I went right back to drinking where it left off. And I wound up back in the hospital out at Fort Ham. And a guy from that PAR, that Coastal Alcohol Rehabilitation, came out to the Fort Ham Hospital. He was on the 15th floor. He was there visiting people who had drug alcohol problems, who were signed up that they admitted they had problems. And I was on the 16th floor, the flight deck at Fort Ham Hospital, Psychiatric unit. And somebody from the 15th floor told him about me up on the 16th floor, professing to have drug and alcohol problems and that I worked for the post office. And he came up there out of his way, without even having it planned, came up there and he talked to me and he told me what had happened to him. He didn't ask me nothing about what had happened to me or how I wound up there. He told me what had happened to him. He told me he had been in the Mid-Hudson Psychiatric Center for the criminally insane. He was in there facing a murder charge. He committed a crime in a blackout and couldn't participate in the trial because he couldn't remember what happened. And they put him in the insane asylum for the criminally insane prison, psychiatric hospital he was in. And he said on that hospital that some people told him to look at his past and see how many times he got in trouble, how many times he drank. He didn't get in trouble, but the times he got in serious trouble and wound up in there even, how was he drinking, how was he using? And he started connecting, and they told him to go to the doctor that he was seeing and tell the doctor he believed he had alcohol problems, and that they were having a meeting there on that particular prison camp hospital, and asked the doctor if he could go to those meetings. And the doctor granted him permission to go to the meetings. And he said that the people who came into there started taking him out of the institution to meetings in the community. And up in that area, you know, upstate New York, you got some really good groups up there. You got like a Crow Hill group and the Mary Knoll group, and some groups that are really service-orientated groups. And they would go anywhere, do anything to help somebody. I met them later on, some members from that group up in the Hudson Valley area. And surely enough, he said what happened was he got deemed competent to participate in his own trial. And from there, he got shipped up to Sing Sing, and he celebrated his first anniversary in Sing Sing. And he got shipped back down to Rikers Island to stand trial. And at the trial, he got reduced sentence and another reduced sentence to involuntary manslaughter, voluntary manslaughter, and got paroled into a halfway house that was experimental, treating drug addicts and alcoholics back in 77, 78. And from there, he had got sober and did his 4th step and 5th step, he went back to the post office that he had worked for before, doing his 8th and 9th steps, and to apologize to some people there. And they asked him, say, you're looking good, you're doing good, why don't you ask for reinstatement? And on some federal jobs, you can always ask for reinstatement. You don't lose your rights to that particular job privilege. And he did, and he said that what happened was, even though he was on parole in a halfway house, he went before the judge, and the judge told him if the state would lift his parole, that they would give him the job back with the post office. And surely enough, he said, things happen, and he got his parole lifted and became a free citizen and got his job back, and he became a CAC, a counselor of alcoholics, and that's what he was doing for the post office, counseling people like me. And I joined the group at the post office. The EAP was having a meeting, and I started going to AA. And from that, my life took a tremendous change. One quick thing, that mom that I was talking about that left me and came back when I was in 9th grade, I left New York and left a job and came home to help take care of her. She had a heart attack and was disabled slightly. And her last years, from 1998, when I retired in 97, 98, up until 2003, 2004, I took care of my mom. I got a chance to live right beside her in a house and do things. And all this time, I'm in the program. In the post office, when they talk about this program being beyond your wildest dreams, believe me, they told me when I was young. I came in, I was 25, 26. They said, shoot for the stars, kid. And if you miss the stars, you'll land on the moon, and that'll still be out of this world. And that's what I did. I got promoted. I had worked certain jobs all over Brooklyn, Queens, and they did a restructure, reorg in 91, 92. We started with about 87, 88. And so I got promoted and whatever. And when I moved down south here to help my mom, they wanted me to work in Charlotte. And I didn't want to work in Charlotte and drive back and forth every day. I wanted to be close to home. I transferred to Rockingham. And the guy asked me, said, well, since you're that serious about helping your family, so why don't you retire? And I told him I couldn't stand the pay cut. And he told me, do you know what you'll make? I said, no, I never examined retiring from the Postal Service. And he said, let's look at it. He sent a fax to Human Resources and came back, and he showed me what I'd make for being retired from the post office. I went back, come through Rockingham from Charlotte, stopped in Rockingham, cleaned out my locker. I ain't worked since then. Now, I did pretty good in New York. Up there, I held some some nice jobs in the Postal Service. I had some nice jobs, station manager jobs, and yada, yada, and yada, yada. And so I did really good. So instead of not getting what I wanted in the Air Force, being a teacher and a trainer, I got to do it in the Postal Service in my career, sober. That's about it for me. What I try to do today and be about today is service. Like my sponsor, that guy who came into that hospital to talk to me, I try to go to places where people are locked up and confined today. I go behind the walls of prisons. One prison I went through for 12 years straight. I just stopped going last year to a prison. I try to be at the meeting when it's my turn to be at the meeting. I try to do the things that are necessary to stay behind that wall that doctor was talking about way back then. The only help for us is to be behind that wall. And I try to practice these principles. They tell me when I get up here to stand straight, look at you guys, and be honest. Well, 3 out of 3 ain't bad tonight. I stood up here, I did straight, and I've been honest with you. One last thing before I go. I heard this little poem. I heard this little poem, and it was called Broken Dreams. And I'd like to recite this little poem for you, because it explains just about everything that ever happened to me. It says, as children bring their broken toys and tears for us to mend, I took my broken dreams to God because he was my friend. But instead of leaving him in peace to work alone, I hung around and tried to help with ways that were my own. Finally, after waiting, I said, my God, how could you be so slow? He said, what could I do, my child? You never would let go. And so I learned in this program how to let go of all that negative, all that history. My past doesn't have to define my future. Thanks for letting me share.